I never imagined a small inheritance would lead to a 3-month nightmare with the neighborhood. Karen. But when you own beachfront property in Florida, even a modest slice, you discover just how entitled some people can be. The security cameras I installed as an afterthought captured everything, from her first trespass to the moment officers put her in handcuffs. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Vincent Zimmerman, and until 6 months ago, I was just another overworked small business owner running a hardware store in Gulf Breeze, Florida. Then my uncle passed away, leaving me his small beachfront cottage. It wasn't fancy, just a weathered 2-bedroom place with a private strip of beach that stretched about 50 yards. But it was mine, deed and all, including that little slice of paradise where the waves kissed the shore. I'd barely moved in when Karen Pemberton, the HOA president of the neighboring Seychelles Shores community, knocked on my door. She stood there in her pressed khaki shorts and polo shirt emblazoned with the HOA logo, clipboard in hand and diamond tennis bracelet glinting in the sun. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm Karen Pemberton, president of Seychelles Shores HOA. I wanted to drop by these welcome materials and discuss your association dues." I blinked, confused. "I don't think my property is part of your HOA. My uncle owned this place outright for 30 years. Her smile tightened. "There must be some misunderstanding. All properties along this stretch participate in our community association. It's for the greater good." I politely explained that my deed showed no HOA affiliation, but promised to double-check my paperwork. As she left, I noticed her glancing repeatedly toward my beach access path. "Lovely view you have," she commented. "Our residents have always enjoyed access to this stretch of beach." Something in her tone made me uneasy. "My uncle mentioned the beach portion is private property. Was he allowing community access?" Karen's laugh sounded forced. "Oh, Harold was such a dear. He understood the importance of sharing our beautiful coastline. I'm sure you'll continue his generous tradition." After she left, I called my uncle's attorney, who confirmed what I suspected. My property, including the beach portion, was completely private and not affiliated with any HOA. The neighboring association had no legal rights to it whatsoever. I might have let the whole thing drop, but 3 days later, I came home from work to find beach chairs I didn't recognize set up on my sand. A family I'd never seen was having a picnic near the water's edge. When I approached them, they seemed genuinely confused. "The HOA president said this beach is for community use," the father explained, showing me a map with highlighted community access paths, one of which cut directly through my property. I explained the situation, and they apologetically packed up. That evening, I installed private property signs at the boundaries and ordered security cameras online. The next morning, Karen was at my door again, this time with a stern expression. "Several residents have complained about your new signs," she said. "They're unsightly and unwelcoming. They're also legally necessary," I replied. "Someone's been distributing incorrect information claiming my beach is community property." Her face flushed. "Vincent, you need to understand how things work around here. That beach has been used by our residents for years. Your uncle never had an issue with it. Did he explicitly give permission?" "It was an understanding," she said vaguely. "We took care of beach cleanup, and he allowed access. Surely you don't want to be the neighbor who ruins our community traditions?" I stood my ground. "I'm not part of your HOA, Karen. The beach is private property." Her eyes narrowed. "You might want to reconsider. Making enemies in a small community like this isn't wise." Was that a threat? I wondered as she walked away. The security cameras arrived the next day. I set them up at key points: the beach access path, the property boundaries, and the front of the house. Little did I know how crucial that decision would be. The following Saturday, I was working at my hardware store when my phone buzzed with motion alerts from the security system. The live feed showed Karen leading a group of about 15 people right past my signs and onto my beach. They were carrying coolers, umbrellas, and beach toys. I called the non-emergency police line to report trespassers. then closed the shop early and drove home. By the time I arrived, 2 police officers were already speaking with Karen, who was gesturing animatedly. "There he is!" she exclaimed when she saw me. "Vincent, tell these officers about the community beach access agreement." Officer Martinez approached me. "Sir, we're trying to sort out a property dispute. Ms. Pemberton claims there's a standing agreement for community beach access." I shook my head. "There's no agreement. I have the deed showing this is private property, and my uncle's attorney confirmed there are no easements or access agreements." Karen interjected. "Harold gave us permission years ago. It's been a neighborhood tradition. Verbal permission would have died with the previous owner." Officer Martinez explained patiently. "If there's no written agreement, and the current owner wants to restrict access, that's his right." The officer asked everyone to leave, which they did, reluctantly and not without glares in my direction. Karen was the last to go, pausing at the property line. "This isn't over," she said. "The community won't stand for this selfishness." I thought that would be the end of it, but it was only the beginning. The next day, I found my private property signs had been removed. The security footage showed 2 teenagers taking them down late at night, but couldn't clearly capture their faces. I installed new signs, this time securing them better and adding, "Area under video surveillance. Warnings." Then the emails started, community-wide messages from Karen about the new neighbor who's restricting traditional beach access, and working together to preserve community amenities. She never named me explicitly, but everyone knew who she meant. Then came the negative online reviews for my hardware store from people I'd never served, all posted within a 24-hour period. I was beginning to understand what Karen meant by making enemies in a small community. One evening, after closing the shop, I returned home to find a notice taped to my door, an official-looking document claiming my property was in violation of coastal access laws. It had the Seashell Shores HOA letterhead but cited Florida statutes that, after some research, I discovered either didn't exist or didn't apply to my property. I consulted Rita Chambers, a local attorney who specialized in property disputes. She confirmed what I already knew: my beach was fully private, and the HOA had no authority over my property. "This is borderline harassment," Rita said, reviewing the notices and emails. "And potentially defamation regarding the business reviews. Want me to send a cease and desist letter?" I hesitated. "Let me try talking to her one more time. Maybe we can reach some kind of compromise." The next day, I invited Karen over to discuss the situation calmly. To my surprise, she accepted, arriving promptly at the agreed time wearing a pleasant smile that didn't match the coldness in her eyes. "I appreciate you reaching out," she said as I offered her iced tea on the porch overlooking the disputed beach. "I knew you'd come around. I want to clear up misunderstandings," I explained. "I'm not part of your HOA and have no legal obligation to provide beach access. But I'm willing to discuss limited, scheduled community events if we can agree on terms." Karen set down her glass. "Vincent, you don't understand. That beach has been a community resource for over a decade. Your uncle knew that maintaining good relationships meant sharing. Did he ever formally agree to that?" Her smile tightened. "Not everything requires paperwork. It was understood." "Well, I need something formal. Maybe we can draw up an agreement for occasional community days." "Unacceptable," she interrupted. "Daily access has always been our arrangement." "There was no arrangement," I insisted. "And the hostile actions, removing my signs, sending misleading legal notices, organizing negative reviews of my business, need to stop." Karen's facade cracked. "Those reviews are just honest customer feedback. And that notice contains accurate legal information. It cites non-existent statutes." She stood abruptly. "I've tried being reasonable. The community board meeting is next week. I suggest you attend and explain to everyone why you're denying access to a beach that's been shared for years. See how that affects your little hardware store." After she left, I called Rita and asked her to prepare the cease and desist letter after all. Things escalated quickly after that. The letter only seemed to infuriate Karen. The next community newsletter included a thinly veiled call to boycott businesses that don't support community values, specifically hardware stores. My customer traffic dropped noticeably over the following days. Then came the incident that changed everything. I was at work when multiple security alerts hit my phone simultaneously. The footage showed Karen and 3 men carrying what looked like surveying equipment onto my beach. They were measuring and placing stakes along the shoreline. I called the police immediately, then rushed home. When I arrived, Karen was directing the men, who were now installing a large sign that read, "Seashell Shores Community Beach Access." "What the hell are you doing?" I demanded, rushing down the path. Karen turned with a triumphant smile. "Establishing our legal right-of-way. These surveyors have confirmed that the community easement extends through this property." "There is no easement," I said through gritted teeth. "You're trespassing, and you know it." One of the men looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, you said you had documentation for this survey?" "It's in my car," Karen said dismissively. "Continue working." Just then, a police cruiser pulled up. Officer Martinez returned, along with a female officer I hadn't met. "Sir," Officer Martinez said, approaching us, "you reported trespassers again? These people are installing signs and stakes on my private property without permission," I explained. "And they're claiming to be surveyors establishing an easement that doesn't exist." The officers asked for ID from everyone. The men produced legitimate surveyor credentials, but when asked for the documentation authorizing the survey, Karen became evasive. "It's a matter of public record," she insisted. "The coastal access has been established through continuous use." "That's not how easements work," the female officer said. "Do you have written authorization to be on this property or conduct a survey?" Karen's composure finally broke. "This is ridiculous. That beach has always been for community use. Vincent is the one causing problems, not me." One of the surveyors spoke up. "She told us this was HOA property and showed us documentation, but I haven't actually seen any official easement records." The officers asked everyone to leave my property while they sorted things out. The surveyors complied immediately, apologizing for the confusion. Karen refused at first, but eventually stalked off after being threatened with a trespassing charge. As they left, I mentioned the security footage to Officer Martinez. "I have everything recorded, including them installing the unauthorized sign." He nodded. "We may need copies of that." That night, after everyone had gone, I reviewed the full security footage. What I saw made my blood run cold. After placing the stakes and sign, Karen had instructed one of the men to move a boundary marker, a small concrete post that had been there since my uncle's time. They had physically altered my property line. The next morning, I took the footage to the police station and filed a formal report. Moving boundary markers wasn't just trespassing, it was criminal. 3 days later, Karen appeared at my door again. This time, her approach was different. "Vincent, I think we got off on the wrong foot," she said with a forced smile. "The HOA board has discussed your concerns, and we're prepared to make you an offer for beach access rights." She handed me a document offering $5,000 for a permanent easement. "The property value difference for private beach access is closer to $100,000, I replied. "But it's not for sale at any price." Her smile vanished. "Don't be difficult. Nobody turns down easy money. I'm not interested. And by the way, tampering with property markers is a criminal offense in Florida." Something flickered in her eyes, concern, perhaps even fear. But it quickly hardened into determination. "You have no proof of anything," she said coldly. "It would be your word against mine. And I've lived here for 15 years. Who do you think people will believe?" I didn't mention the security footage. Something told me it was better to let her continue thinking she was untouchable. The following week brought a new development. Several large trucks delivered construction materials to the HOA community area adjacent to my property. When I inquired with one of the workers, he showed me plans for a new boardwalk, one that would cut directly across my beach. I immediately contacted Rita, who filed for an emergency injunction. Construction was halted pending a hearing, which infuriated Karen. She organized a community beach rights protest right at the edge of my property line. About 20 residents showed up with signs reading, "Beaches are for everyone," and "Share the shore." They stayed just off my property but made enough noise to be disruptive. Local news even showed up to cover the neighborhood dispute. I avoided engaging directly. Instead, I provided the reporter with copies of my deed and property records, along with photos of the "No Trespassing" signs Karen had removed. The resulting news segment was surprisingly balanced, raising questions about the HOA's claims. The day before our court hearing for the injunction, I received an unexpected visitor. It was Michael Jenkins, the HOA treasurer, looking nervous. "I need to talk to you privately," he said, glancing over his shoulder. "Not here." We agreed to meet at a coffee shop in town. Michael arrived looking like he hadn't slept well. "Karen doesn't know I'm talking to you," he began. "But things have gone too far. The HOA never approved that boardwalk project. Karen submitted false minutes claiming we voted on it." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because she's using HOA funds without authorization. The surveyor bills, the construction deposit, over $30,000 so far. When I questioned it, she said it was an emergency expenditure within her authority." "Is it?" He shook his head. "Our bylaws cap emergency spending at $5,000 without board approval. I think she's been doing this for years, but this beach access fight has made her sloppy." Michael slid a flash drive across the table. "Financial records for the past 3 years. There are irregularities I can't explain, cash withdrawals, reimbursements without receipts, vendors that don't seem to exist." "Why give this to me?" "Because you're already fighting her. The rest of the board is afraid to challenge her. She's vindictive. Look what she's done to your business just for standing up to her." I took the drive. "Have you talked to the police?" "Not yet," Michael admitted. "I wanted more evidence first. But be careful, Karen is desperate to get that beach access, and I don't think it's just about community use anymore." The next day in court, Karen arrived with an attorney who presented elaborate arguments about historical use and implied easements. The judge was unimpressed, particularly when Rita presented certified property records showing clear boundaries and no registered easements. The emergency injunction was granted, permanently preventing construction of the boardwalk across my property. As we left the courtroom, Karen's face was a mask of barely controlled rage. "You have no idea what you've done," she hissed as she passed me. "This isn't just about a beach anymore." Those words, combined with Michael's warning, prompted me to review the financial records he'd provided. What I found was shocking. For years, Karen had been siphoning small amounts from the HOA accounts, administrative expenses, without receipts, landscaping services, from a company that didn't exist, legal consultations, with no corresponding documents. But the recent expenses were different. She'd spent over $45,000 in the past month alone, far more than the $30,000 Michael knew about, all related to the beach access project. The surveyor's invoice included line items for boundary adjustment and documentation preparation that seemed suspicious at best. Most concerning was a $15,000 payment to a company called Coastal Property Solutions, with the memo line, "Re Zimmerman Access." I couldn't find any legitimate business by that name registered in Florida. I took everything to Rita, who agreed it warranted further investigation. She helped me compile the information into a comprehensive report, which we submitted to the police department's Financial Crimes Unit. 2 weeks passed with no apparent movement on the case. Karen had gone surprisingly quiet, though I occasionally caught glimpses of her watching my house from her car parked down the street. Then one night, my security system alerted me to movement on the beach. The footage showed Karen and a man I didn't recognize digging near my property line, working by flashlight. I called the police immediately. By the time officers arrived, Karen and her companion had fled, but they'd left behind disturbing evidence of their work, they'd been digging up my original property markers and replacing them with new ones, effectively attempting to redraw my boundary lines to claim part of my beach. The officers documented everything and took my security footage as evidence. This time, they seemed to take the matter more seriously. The next morning, I received a call from Detective Sarah Wilson with the Financial Crimes Unit. "Mr. Zimmerman, we've been investigating the information you provided regarding Seashell Shores HOA finances," she said. "We've uncovered sufficient evidence to move forward with charges against Karen Pemberton for embezzlement and fraud." I told her about the previous night's incident. "That's actually consistent with what we've discovered," Detective Wilson replied. "It appears Ms. Pemberton has been selling unauthorized access rights to your beach." "Selling access? To whom?" "A developer called Coastal Property Solutions. They've been planning a beachfront restaurant and paid the HOA, or rather, paid Ms. Pemberton, for guaranteed beach access through your property. That's why she's been so persistent." Everything suddenly made sense: Karen's desperation, the escalating tactics, the large unexplained payment. The developer believed they were making a legitimate deal with the HOA. Detective Wilson continued. "They had no idea the access rights weren't valid. Ms. Pemberton provided falsified documents showing an established easement across your property." 3 days later, I was working at my hardware store when Rita called. "Turn on the local news," she said without preamble. I flipped to the news on my phone just in time to see Karen being escorted from the HOA office in handcuffs. The reporter explained that the HOA president had been arrested on multiple charges, including embezzlement, fraud, forgery of official documents, and criminal property tampering. The story only grew from there. As investigators dug deeper, they discovered Karen had been skimming from HOA accounts for years, totaling over $200,000. She'd created fake vendors, submitted false invoices, and even charged residents for services that were never performed. The beach access dispute had been her undoing. The developer, upon discovering they'd paid for access rights that didn't exist, had provided authorities with all their correspondence with Karen, including the falsified documents she'd created showing my property as part of the HOA. In the aftermath, I received numerous apologies from neighbors who'd participated in Karen's campaign against me. Many admitted they'd never questioned her claims about the beach access, simply taking her word that it had always been community property. Michael Jenkins, who had blown the whistle, was elected interim HOA president. One of his first official acts was to issue a formal acknowledgement that my beach property was private and not subject to HOA rules or access rights. As for Karen, she accepted a plea deal for reduced jail time in exchange for full financial restitution. The judge was particularly harsh about her tampering with property boundaries, calling it a fundamental attack on the property rights that our society is built upon. 6 months later, things had settled into a new normal. My hardware store was thriving again, and I developed a much friendlier relationship with my neighbors. I even arranged occasional community beach days, on my terms, with proper liability waivers, and limited to once a month during summer. Michael stopped by one evening as I was enjoying sunset on my porch. "Thought you'd like to know," he said, taking a seat. "Karen's house finally sold at auction. The new owner seemed nice, nothing like her, thankfully." "That's good to hear." He gestured toward the beach, where the waves gently lapped at the shore. "You know, I always wondered why she was so obsessed with your particular stretch of beach. The community has other access points." I nodded. The detective explained it. "Apparently this spot has the only deep water access for quite a distance. The developer needed it for their restaurant plans, boats delivering fresh seafood directly to their kitchen dock." Michael shook his head. "All that trouble for a restaurant that will never be built. Some people will do anything for money," I replied, watching the sun sink below the horizon, painting my private beach in shades of gold and crimson. The security cameras still kept watch over my property, though they rarely captured anything more exciting than seagulls and the occasional trespassing crab. But I kept them running, a silent reminder that sometimes the truth needs to be seen to be believed. In the end, Karen's demand for access to my private beach had indeed shown her true colors, on security footage that exposed not just her trespassing, but the web of lies and fraud she'd built over years. My small slice of paradise was secure, and I'd learned a valuable lesson about standing my ground, even when it seemed the whole community was against me. As I sat there watching the waves, I couldn't help but think that my uncle would have been proud. He'd left me more than just property. He'd given me the chance to discover what I was made of when pushed to my limits. And in that sense, despite all the headaches, I wouldn't have traded the experience for anything.